A cool 1.78 million evaporated. I mean, can you imagine losing that much money in 3 years? It's an insane amount. So to put it into context here, that's a loss of $68 per hour, 24 hours a day. That's more than Canadians make in an 8-hour workday, let alone 24 hours a day. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, but this is the Canadian housing market crash. The housing market in Canada is not just crashing in Toronto, it's crashing across the country, and I'm going to prove it to you with these unbelievable losses that we're going to go through in this video. So let's get right into it here with a loss of 65% in real terms. This person got absolutely destroyed, and that's what I really want to point out here. So this house in Fort Erie sold for $800,000 at the market peak in 2021. They just sold it for $450,000. That's a 43.75% loss, $350,000. And not only that, if you add in inflation, you're talking 65% loss. That is absolutely crazy when you think about the situation. And then we go over to Vancouver Island. You know, Vancouver Island during 2021, 2022, it was the Airbnb boom town, wasn't it? That's where everybody was buying up second properties and Airbnbs, and now these people are being wrecked, as I'm going to show you right here. So Parksville on Vancouver Island was an Airbnb speculative boom town, but boom then turned to bust when Airbnb got essentially banned in BC. They bought it for $899,000 in 2022, and they just sold for $765,000. That's a near 15% loss, $135,000 gone, wiped out in the span of 3 years. So really, these people are just getting wrecked. And then we move on to Victoria in Vancouver Island, which was another Airbnb speculative boom town. A lot of people were moving from Vancouver there. And again, it's just turning to losses. It's turning to a bust. The housing market is crumbling there and imploding, as it is all across Canada. And we'll get into some other places like Calgary shortly. So Victoria was affordable, but then the investors moved in. We all know that story. This condo sold for $682,000 in 2023. It just sold for $529,000. That's a 22% loss, minus $153,000. The condo collapse is spreading, and it really is when you think about how these losses are spread out across Canada. Then we move on to Van China, as I call it here, because it's such a fitting name for the money laundering capital of Canada. This beautiful condo in Van China just sold for $1.08 million. It sold for $1.47 million in 2021. That means they lost 26.5% or $385,000. And another thing we have to do is look at realistic rates of inflation. So I made this tweet comparing all the different AI models of what they thought a realistic number for inflation was for Canada, which wasn't the CPI. So it was interesting the way some of them calculated it, but they all came back with pretty close numbers. And I like DeepSeek the best, not because it was the highest at 30%, but because it actually factored in the money supply, whereas none of the other models actually did that. And I thought that was really impressive. It was a much deeper analysis, no pun intended there. So, you know, let's just say 25%, right? 25% is what inflation is. Well, that means you've got to add that to this to get to the real amount that people are losing. So in this case, that would be over 50%. And in this case, that is going to be near 50%. And in this case here, you're talking about near 40%. And then in this case here, I mean, this is the staggering thing, right? If you're adding 25% to this, where are you? I mean, if that isn't being wrecked, I don't know what is. And, you know, you've got to take those numbers with a grain of salt as well, because inflation is highly personal to somebody in Vancouver. They probably experienced a hell of a lot more inflation than somebody, say, in Saskatchewan. And then this money laundering Van China condo that sold for $5.78 million in 2022. I mean, just think about that. I mean, it's a really nice condo, don't get me wrong, really nice penthouse condo, but $5.78 million. I mean, you could buy a property in the Cayman Islands, you could also buy an income property in the Cayman Islands, and you could live down there tax-free. Why on earth would you spend that amount of money in Canada? Unless, of course, you're money laundering, which is the case in Van China a lot of the times. So it just sold for $4 million. They lost 30.79%, which is crazy. Add that 25, 55%, near 56%. A cool 1.78 million evaporated. I mean, can you imagine losing that much money in 3 years? It's an insane amount. So to put it into context here, that's a loss of $68 per hour, 24 hours a day. That's more than Canadians make in an 8-hour workday, let alone 24 hours a day. Every hour when you're sleeping, you're losing $68 an hour. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, but this is the Canadian housing market crash that people fail to accept. Happening in Vancouver, happening in Victoria, happening in random parts of Vancouver Island, in the Okanagan, and it's happening in Toronto and the surrounding areas, which we'll get to. We've got many more. There's just too many to even go through here, but I've just picked out some of the ones that I thought were really interesting. So this is a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment that was bought in Victoria, BC, and just sold for a 29% nominal loss, purchased at the 2022 peak. But here's the thing that was really interesting about it. It sold for just 2% less than in 2017, and that isn't accounting for all the inflation. So the person who sold that probably thought, oh, wow, we got out, at least it was only 2% plus the realtor fees and everything else, maybe 7 or 8, 9% that they paid in the finish. But they're not thinking that they got ripped a new one by inflation. They got their ass absolutely spanked and handed to them by inflation. The amount of inflation since 2017 is a hell of a lot. You're talking about 8 years cumulative of inflation there. So it's crazy what's going on. And then this is one from Shazzy here. Downtown Toronto condo sold for $143,000 loss, 24% loss from its peak 2020 price. It's another 1-bed, 1-bath. People don't want these box tiny condos, and that's a near 50% loss again. So these losses are absolutely insane, and they just continue here. Now we're moving into the boom town of Calgary. You're not seeing that many at the moment, but they are starting to appear, especially with condos and apartments filtering into townhouses and other areas. But you're going to see this just implode like all the other markets. It's just a matter of time. So this 1-bed, 1-bath apartment in Calgary just sold for a 17% loss, bought at the peak market in 2024 for $5,000 over asking price. So just think about that for a second. 17% gone in a year, because they bought in May 2024 and they sold here in June 2024. So, you know, a year and a month. So in about a year, they lost 17%. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. But this is the thing. It was just sold for $160,000, which is less than it sold for in 2006. And if you go down into the history here, you can see that it sold here in 2006 for $169,000. And look at this price, 1982, $8,800. That was probably closer to what people were earning back then. But $169,000 in 2006. 2025, it just sold for $160,000. So many people told you, move to Calgary, invest in property in Calgary, it'll be fantastic. We already know how investing in property in Calgary goes. You don't have to listen to these people. Just look at the facts and the history. People have been wrecked and destroyed in Calgary for decades, and that is just going to continue. It's unfortunate that people listen to the government's propaganda. People listen to all this different stuff, which really shows how just ridiculous this whole narrative that was built around Alberta really was. And then you've got Calgary house sells for a 14% loss after buying at the 2024 market peak for $50,000 over asking price. But get this, it's only up 14% in value over 10 years. So even if you use the CPI here, that is a minus 14% loss. Stellar investment Calgary. I mean, this is just the crazy stuff that people are going to be dealing with. And it's always been like this in Calgary. It's really nothing new that's happening, but it's just going to continue to get worse as the Calgary housing market has really turned that corner over the past 12 months, and we're already starting to see what's happened here. So again, it's just absolutely crazy what's going on in Calgary. And then you've got Brampton. Obviously, Brampton is the center of mortgage fraud and anything fraud, actually. And it's no wonder that Brampton is seeing such a massive price reduction. So the Brampton median real estate price in January 2022 was 1.3 million. In May 2025, it's 875,000. So, you know, that's down about 14%, but add on the 25% and then you're at near 40%. So it just goes to show what's going on. And I like this tweet very much from Red Pill Rick here, which is basically housing market posed for 2025 comeback as lower rates unleash pent-up demand. And this was December 30th, 2024. And then you've got the Financial Post here in 2025. Buyers are not responding as Toronto real estate listings glut passes 30,000 units. And obviously we know that a lot of these mainstream media outlets, they have massive interests, and the real estate mafia has huge influence over a lot of things in Canada. So that is why that you see this kind of influence that happens in the media, and they also pay for a lot of advertising, remember. So there's huge biases that these media outlets have, obviously. It's no real fault of their own. It's just the way things work, and even sometimes they don't even see it. It's up to us as informed people to actually notice it. So this might be the most ridiculous chart I've seen. Comes from Red Pill Rick. Mortgage payments in Vancouver chew up 93% of your income, 78% in Toronto. This is by definition unsustainable. Prices have reached their limit. There is nowhere to go but down. And I totally agree. And if you go to Vancouver and look, like, who is paying $1 million for a 2-bed, 2-bath condo in Vancouver? Well, that's still happening in 2025. Despite that being like over a 50% loss in real terms, people are still buying these for just insane prices. So prices need to come down a hell of a lot more for it to become palatable and affordable for people. And that's just nowhere near where we are right now, especially when you look at this chart here. And it's not going to happen through rates here. And then Shazzy put this: I deal with power of sales almost daily now. I never used to before. Power of sale is where the future is. For your average real estate lawyer at Mark in Metaform Real Estate Lawyer, now you know exactly where things are heading in the GTA housing market. So some insights from a real estate lawyer there as well. So it just goes to show what is happening in the Canadian housing market. The Canadian housing market is absolutely collapsing, and nobody can deny it with all the evidence. All the sources and links are in the description of this video. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. If you want to help support the channel and get the best VPN, you know where to go. Links are in the description. It's ExpressVPN, the VPN that I use. I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.